Welcome back to Dark Discoveries, and this is a very special episode of Gangsters and Gunmen. I'm your host, Dustin, and as always, I am here with
Jimbo.
So we've not done one of these since back in October. It's been a while, so I do apologize for that. We've got some of these on the hook. It's just a matter of getting them done and sprinkling the little good bits out. Like bacon bits on your salad.
Like sprinkles on a sundae.
Yeah, I was thinking bacon bits on
or
salad.
Donuts. Or cookies. Or
oh, you want sprinkles? Second breakfast. Or dessert, whatever you want to call it. But without further ado, this week we're going to highlight one of the Dillinger Gang members, one handsome Harry Pierpont.
I was going to say HHH.
And who do you have?
We have William Blake, whose nickname was Tulsa Jack.
I don't know where that comes from, but I think it's like Richard and Dick and, you know, some of those Jimmy and James are the same. That's closer, but one of those nicknames you don't get.
You're going to find out why he became known as Tulsa Jack during this episode.
Oh, so it's not just a weird thing. So not everybody knows John Dillinger, which I would like to think that everybody that listens to this knows John Dillinger because, you know, that's one of the things that I've always been into. That was probably my introduction into the true crime world. He was slick, fast, public enemy number one, but Dillinger didn't start out as a criminal genius. He had some help along the way. He had a mentor. Not only was it Herman Lamb for his method, he also had handsome Harry Pierpont. Pierpont was the man who taught Dillinger how to rob banks, how to organize his crew, how to stare down a cop without blinking. And legend tells us that Pierpont was colder, smarter, and deadlier than John Dillinger himself. And personally, I don't think John Dillinger killed anybody. I think it just got wrapped up into everybody else in the gang, all the legend and lore, because everybody wanted to be in the bank when John Dillinger robbed it. So if a bank got robbed, they wanted it to be Dillinger. No matter where it was at in the Midwest, they wanted it to be from him. But tonight, we're going to dig into the life of, like I said, handsome Harry, a small-time crook from Indiana to a prison mastermind to the brains of the Dillinger Gang. And finally, we're going to get to his brutal end. So let's roll back the clock. Let's go back to October 13th, 1902. And this story happens to be from my hometown of Muncie, Indiana. Which is funny because he supposedly, his family before they moved, lived in the same neighborhood as my grandma and grandpa. So I want to figure out exactly where that was at because I think that's kind of interesting.
You could have been trudging the same area that handsome Harry was.
Whoever knew, like riding my bike and running down, you know, the street, that I could have been somewhere close to something that would eventually.
Okay. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm going to go down a little rabbit trail right here. Have you ever thought of this? I thought about this the other night. It was storming real bad, right? And there was trees falling and all that as I was driving home from work. And I thought to myself, you know,
you thought to yourself,
there's a lot of woods in America, all over the world, basically.
But yeah, when you think about it, it took me going to Texas because you think that most of the world is pretty full except for your cornfields here and there. You get into Texas and there's in like Oklahoma, there's still a lot of land that's still prairie. You know, it's fields of cow, undeveloped, and it's crazy to think that there's still a lot of that area out there.
Right. And so Dustin, you and I, we went to, a couple weeks ago, we went to a special update on the Herb Baumeister case with the Fox Hollow Farm murders. And we were driving around, you know, and we were trying to find the house, the way we could get in or whatever. And you were like, well, this wasn't even here then, you know? And you think, well, a lot of these side roads weren't here then. A lot of these interstates weren't here then. Am I walking where somebody died, where there was a tribal camp, where there was a dinosaur, where there was a murder? You never know who has been there before you.
Yeah, the interstate system is going to cover up a lot of those spots and questions, and I'm sure they run across some stuff when
it's like
they're looking.
It's It's like right down here in Indianapolis when they were redoing that bridge, Belmont Bridge, maybe they found like, what was it, 15 bodies or something?
But were they old bodies though? Or was it?
I think it's older bodies, but it's like the bridge had been built over them or that had been built over a cemetery or something, but they didn't know who they were.
Yeah. Because, the Native Americans, they didn't. Usually they're in a mound or something. Not always. You'll bury, rivers change. So what once was flat land could be a river now, vice versa. So you're going to have land that's potentially got something underneath it deeper than they're digging. So
right. So that just made me think when you said that your grandma lived right around the corner from, or in the same neighborhood as Handsome Harry, maybe they crossed paths.
When I was in the Greenwich Village in New York City, that was, I was like, man, like think about who walked these streets in the Greenwich Village in the 1960s itself. You mean the gangsters and the musicians and,
the Mean Street Posse.
that was Connecticut, but that was Greenwich, Connecticut, not, the Greenwich Village. Right. But here you're walking on the same sidewalks that, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, Sammy the Bull, anybody, the Beastie Boys, Run DMC, all this stuff, you had in these areas that, it was the place to be back then, everybody was there. And as you travel the country, there's a lot of places that if you just slow down and like check out, there's a lot of cool places out there. They may not be a whole day trip, but they may take you all day to get there. But you're re-stepping through history where these iconic things happened, where, next time I go through Mississippi, I want to go where the plane crash is for Lynyrd Skynyrd. The Crossroads is in Mississippi. Maybe I can sell my soul to the devil and learn to play guitar because I don't have the patience, the finger dexterity, or the talent to do it by myself. It's a 4-lane highway. It's a 4-lane highway. So they said you got to be careful. You may get hit by a car, but maybe take my Les Paul out there at midnight and see if I can get a little bit of boogie woogie out of it. So Harry Pete Pierpont didn't exactly grow up with a silver spoon in his mouth. He was a Midwestern kid with working class roots, living in a world where opportunity was scarce and temptation was everywhere. By his late teens, he was already on the wrong side of the law. He started small, petty thefts, car thefts, the occasional holdup. But there's the thing. Pierpont wasn't reckless. He wasn't smashing windows and running wild like some of the younger punks of the day. Pierpont's troubles with the police began after an incident in the summer of 1921, in which he received a severe head injury. And if we know much about head injuries, that can change your temperament. So this could have been, maybe a turning point in, demeanor and things, because his demeanor did change after that incident. And Pierpont complained of eye problems, dizziness, and headaches. And with this came a fascination of firearms. Nothing wrong with a fascination in firearms. Pierpont would be arrested in 1921 for carrying a concealed weapon. This would result in him spending 10 days in jail before the charges were dropped. After this, he'd be committed to the state hospital. And the record on the inquest held on September 19th, 1921, his mother stated that he became sullen, suspicious, and prone to outburst after his injury. 2 days later, he was committed to the state hospital for the mentally ill at the Central Indiana Hospital. So, like I said, he was committed to the Central Indiana Hospital for the mentally ill. He would be diagnosed with dementia. Basically, they had a term for this that's obsolete that described it as schizophrenia and a chronic mental illness. Paracox is, I think, how you say it. Pracox, but that term's been taken away, and who knows how you really say it, because words can be hard. They don't always sound the way they look. On January 2nd, 1922, Pierpont would steal a car in Indianapolis and drive it to Greencastle, Indiana, where he would rob Cook's hardware store of 9 handguns. Just 5 days later, he would attempt to steal another car, but the owner caught him in the act. Pierpont fired his gun, slightly wounding the car's owner, And this is where it gets good. His wife would hit Pierpont over the head with the roast she was holding. You know, hey,
nothing
baby,
like getting slapped upside the head with a good pot roast.
hey, baby, you know that pot roast you made was good. Can you go hit somebody else in the head with it?
It was
really
killer.
It really tenderizes the meat when you beat the shit out of somebody with it.
Well, he already had head trauma, right? Did it knock him back into
Maybe it knocked
sanity?
him back normal.
Right.
This would land Pierpont in the Terre Haute jail, where he would try to escape by sawing the bars off of a cell, but he would be unsuccessful. I always thought that was just a cartoon thing. Yeah, you see, we put a file and a hacksaw in your birthday cake. On March 12th, 1922, he would be sentenced to 2 to 14 years for assault and battery with intent to murder. I love how it's like just such a, we're going to give you 2 to 14. It's like, this is the minimum, but we're going to throw the max at you too. So we'll decide in the middle how much you get. And on November 17th, 1923, Pierpont would be transferred to the newly built Indiana Reformatory in Pendleton, Indiana, which is just north of Indianapolis. It's where most people go. I think, did McVeigh go to Pendleton for a while?
I think so.
Before he went to Terre Haute to be executed, Mike Tyson, I think, served in Pendleton, didn't he?
I know he was at Plainfield for a while too.
Plainfield. That may, like I said, I may get those confused. But I felt like it was Pendleton. Pierpont would be denied for parole in May of 1923, but he would ultimately be granted his release in 1924. So 2 years for attempted murder back then. His family would move to Brazil, Indiana during his incarceration. So this is where his dad would run a sand and gravel business. But it didn't take long for Pierpont to start running with the wrong crowd again. It's believed he may have been a part of a gang that robbed the Sour Wine Theater in Brazil, Indiana. What's it with outlaws and theater? I mean, come on. I guess there was no entertainment in TV, so a movie theater probably had a lot of money, and it was before credit cards and checks, really. So you're not going to go pay for a 50-cent movie or a 25-cent movie with a check, I wouldn't think. And by November of 1924, Pierpont would find his way to a boarding house ran by Pearl Elliott, a notorious madam who became an associate of the Dillinger gang. At 2:45 on the afternoon of November 26th, 1924, 7 men led by Harry Pierpont would rob the South Marion Bank in, of all places, Marion, Indiana. If you've never been there or you live there, I'm sorry. I don't have a lot of good things to say about Marion. And I don't think the people that do live there either. The gang would have 2 men on the outside and then 5 on the inside. No shots would be fired, and the gang would walk out with about $4,000, which is about $75,000 today. APBs would be sent out to 16 towns in a 50-mile radius to be on the getaway car. Reports flew in, but they eventually escaped. It's funny, we're going to put all PBs for 50 miles. But 50 miles back in those days probably took you, I don't know, hour and a half to probably do. The cars weren't as fast. The roads weren't as developed. So it's a black 1910 Ford Model T. Because they didn't have a lot of colors back in the 1920s. You know what they said about the Model T, right? You can get it in any color as long as it's black. You're looking at me like you're lost. Are you okay, Jimbo? Are you having a stroke?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, I'm trying to make you laugh. And
well, you got to say something funny
I'm making
first.
fun of Ford, and you're a Ford man wearing a Ford t-shirt here, and you're not even defending Ford.
No.
Man, you're tough.
Tough audience tonight.
Tough audience. I can tell.
Tough audience.
The bandits' car drove up the side of the bank. 6 men leaped out of on the sidewalk and ran into the building, brandishing revolvers. While the 3 robbers rushed to the rear of the bank to cover officials, the other 3 ordered several customers and the cashier to hold up their hands. The leader of the bandits reportedly cautioned his associates to listen for the alarm. With a revolver near his head, the bank president, Dunn, touched a button on the floor, which set off a burglar alarm. The bandits would immediately run out the door and would speed away with nothing to show for their efforts. Come on, you're trying to rob a bank, and the damn president's going to treat you like that. It's hard times back then, but the banks are insured.
Get a job like everybody else then.
There wasn't no jobs, man. We're 1924. What was going on in the
people
20s?
Working at the bank.
What was going on?
There's movie theaters.
What was going on?
There's food places.
But those jobs are already full. We're in the midst of a depression of epic proportions. It was so great, we called it the Great Depression. Right? When did the Great Depression start?
I don't know. You tell me. You're the one that said it.
You want to know?
Now, see, you probably not even in the Great Depression yet, and you're going to be like, oops.
Let's go to the Google machine. When did the Great Depression start? Because I may look like an asshole. 1929. So we're almost to the Great Depression.
Yeah,
we're
thank you.
Almost
thank
there.
you. So there is still jobs out there.
Well, when was the Dust Bowl? Because the Dust Bowl hurt
Does
a
it
bunch,
matter?
right?
There's still jobs.
Let's see. When was the Dust Bowl?
Well, you should just Google when the first
1930. I'm just striking out on.
What about the first McDonald's? Can they go work at McDonald's yet?
No, that was like the 50s.
I think so.
There was no Ray Kroc to hostily take over McDonald's. Just wait. That's a movie. That's a movie
Starring Michael Keaton, right?
for Tragedy of the Cinema when we do a double feature of Ray Kroc.
I don't know if tragedy can handle anymore, Dustin.
I'm still your best episode of the year. I'm like 2 of your top 3.
The year is young.
I'm talking about the rolling year.
Pretty soon that'll
year.
fall off and you won't have a leg to stand on.
I'll find a way. Don't worry about that. I'll weasel my way in. If I got to kick Bond off the show, I'll get on there. Bond has to take a vacation at some point. So while out on parole, Pierpont, he would be arrested and all this stuff. I mean, he would, go out on parole and he would go right back. Well, I guess he was on parole because he was released from prison. So he left prison on parole.
Right.
Sorry, we got off track here. And we got to get back on. We have to right the ship. So out on parole, he would go right back to his old ways. So on December 22nd, 1924, at the John D. Shelby hardware store in the great city of Lebanon, Indiana.
The birthplace of this podcast.
It's not the it's not the birthplace.
It's where we did most of our recordings.
It used to be the home base
Right.
of this podcast, but he would rob them of 2 rifles, 2 double-barrel shotguns, a hammerless double-barreled shotgun, 2 single-shot rifles, which I don't know what you're doing there, a Marlin repeating rifle. There we go, some lever action. 2 Remington repeating rifles, 8 pocket knives, a 6-inch barreled pistol, a German 32 caliber revolver, and about 50 boxes of ammunition. And then he also took 4 flashlights, several batteries, and some other articles, probably some duct tape, some rope, your normal MO of stuff you're going to rob.
I hope he grabbed a bag of beef jerky.
Do they have mass-produced beef jerky back then? Man, they would have. The food that won the war, or the West, or the gangster era, that'd be awesome. I love beef jerky. On the next day, December 23rd, 1924, 6 armed bandits would go to the Upland State Bank. Pretty sure that's probably in Upland, Indiana, if you can tell how creative we are on bank names. And within 15 minutes of closing time, they would rob the bank of roughly $2,500, which is roughly $47,000 today. Keep in mind the average income in 1924. You want to take a guess what the average income was?
Are you talking about like wage per hour, wage per year?
Average income for the year.
For the year?
For the year.
In
1924.
24, I will say $1,200.
Nope.
Lower?
$3,481. So these dudes are good for like 10 years, but if we know anything about the gangster era,
it's not enough.
It was never enough. So Pierpont's gang, and you got to split that. Gosh, he had 6 people, probably still running 5-6 people at that time. If he was smart, he would have went, a couple guys and you split it 50-50, but you got to start splitting that money multiple ways, 4, 5, 6 ways. It don't go very far. Still could get a year's salary out of it though. Pierpont's gang would start to unravel after one of the members was noticed flashing a large amount of money. This wouldn't stop Pierpont though. He would lay low until March 10th, 1925, and shortly before 4 p.m., 4 unmasked bandits walked into the New Harmony Bank
in New Harmony,
and robbed it of $10,000 in cash and bonds. This haul today would be just shy of $185,000. For 4 people, I don't know how easy it was to get rid of bonds and how much of it was actual, how much of it was actual bonds. Can you get rid of that? And we're getting to the point where places are going to probably start closing and those bonds are no good, but $185,000 divided by 4, I'd take it. With tips and sightings, police would come into southern Indiana and place guards along every road, and they would give their officers the order to shoot and kill. During March, Pierpont and his gang would rob banks in Kokomo and Laketon, Indiana, but their luck would run out on April 2nd, my brother's birthday of all times, 1925, which he was not around yet, in Detroit, Michigan. This would result in Pierpont being sentenced to 10 to 21 years and a $1,000 fine, and he was sent right back to Pendleton, and he would enter the Indiana Reformatory for a second time on May 6th, 1925. He defied authorities by giving them the wrong name, refusing to recognize the warden, and declining to make a statement or have his picture taken, and he would resort to spitting on the guards. So you don't think that they're going to remember you? Like, what's your name? I don't know. Jim.
But how are they going to know it's him?
This is early, probably in fingerprinting, so you would think they'd have some type of fingerprint and some type of picture, but how are you going to refuse to take a picture?
Right. Yeah. No, you're going to go over there and take a picture, right?
Yeah, or we're going to beat the crap out of you with these.
And then you're going to
clubs.
get a picture anyway.
Yeah. You may have a black eye or a split lip or a cracked
and you'll still have a picture of you.
But we're going to have a picture of all that swelling. Eventually, I ain't ready for that yet. So Pierpont would only stay in the Indiana State Reformatory in Pendleton for 2 months. But during this time, he would meet Homer Van Meter, who we've talked about, and John Dillinger. Pierpont would take Dillinger under his wing and become his mentor. He would show Dillinger how to carry himself, how to think like a professional criminal. Dillinger later said, "I went in as a petty thief and came out a hardened criminal." So these guys are they're getting a schooling and an education on how to carry yourself, how to put some of these things that you've heard about in action, to lay it out, plan it. These guys are smart. They know they're going to rob a bank. When they get with Dillinger, they're going to case the place out for a week or so. They didn't drink during the planning. They stayed sober during all this. They would take gas cans and stash them in places on their escape route so you wouldn't run out of gas. So, they were starting to really find a way to make this more, I don't want to say of a career, but more of a well thought out, process. And they're going to operate like a well-oiled machine. Eventually, Eddie Van Meter and John Dillinger would be transferred to Michigan City, and they would rejoin Harry Pierpont, who was like I said, sent there a couple months after being sent to Pendleton. And they would meet up with other bank robbers. They were Russell Clark, Charles Makeley, and Red Hamilton. The only thing stopping them from robbing banks together was prison. They would make several escape attempts, but they wouldn't be successful just yet. By the summer of 1932, Pierpont began to make plans for the greatest prison break in Indiana history. His operation would depend on his accomplices on the outside who had the money and the guns, and they would bribe and kind of hide out to try to figure everything out. It would also need somebody on the inside who was dependable and who was about to be released. So Pierpont approached John Dillinger about helping them escape. In return, he would be offered the opportunity to join their bank robbing team. What could go wrong?
Not everybody makes it out, right?
What can go wrong with trying to break somebody out of jail? I just don't know. Or prison. I just don't know. Nothing seems like it would go wrong. When Walter Dietrich would be befriended by Harry Pierpont in 1932, this is when the Lamb method was introduced to the gang. Before Dillinger's release, there were 3 groups reportedly gave him a list of the best banks and stores to rob, as well as the names of reliable accomplices. He would know almost as much as they did about the bank robbery. By the spring of 1933, the plan was set. Pierpont, aided by his girlfriend, Mary Kinder, who agreed to help with a breakout of her brother, Earl Northern, was added to the list of escapees. Mary's brother, Earl, was Pierpont's old partner. Pearl Elliott, the Kokomo Madame, who had been involved in Pierpont's Kokomo robbery, was the one who would supply the money to bribe the prison guards. So I guess even back then, you're going to be able to, police are going to be, I hate to call prison guards police because they're 2 separate, careers and jobs and responsibilities, but it is kind of a law enforcement. So if you're going to double your salary in a day, these guys are going to take it. They're going to take the opportunity. So maybe even more, who knows? On September 25th, 1933, Pierpont, Russell Clark, Charles Makeley, and Red Hamilton would confer during an exercise period and decided to crash out the next day. Each man swore an oath not to be recaptured without a fight. The next morning, Pierpont, Makeley, Hamilton, Clark, Dietrich, and James Oklahoma Jack Clark, Edward is Shous. I know how to say it, but it's not coming to me right now because words are hard.
Shous?
I think that's how it is, but I feel like it's pronounced a little bit different. Joseph Fox, Joe Burns, Jim Jenkins would escape from the Michigan City jail using 3 .45 caliber pistols that Dillinger had smuggled into the jail. The escape had been carefully planned before Dillinger's parole by Pierpont, Hamilton, and Dillinger himself. Dillinger had spent the summer of 1933 robbing banks throughout Indiana, Ohio, to raise enough money to smuggle the guns into the prison. How he smuggled the guns is an unknown. Some accounts say that Dillinger tossed the weapons over the wall like he did on previous attempts, but the most widely believed theory is Dillinger hid the guns in boxes of thread sent to the prison shirt factory. Because one thing that he did, John was always good with his hands, so that was one of the things that he kind of did in prison was work in the shirt factory. So if he's able to get in there, hide it, get it in, they can kind of set the trap. So after 2:00 that afternoon, Pierpont and Russell Clark told shirt factory Superintendent George H. Stevens that one of the officials needed to see him in the basement. Stevens was soon overpowered by the rest of the gang. Walter Dietrich sought out Deputy Superintendent Albert E. Evans, telling him that there was a fight in progress, leading him to a trap as well. Evans was greeted by 7 men with pistols, and 3 with clubs. Foreman Dudley Triplett came to the basement for supplies and was soon captured. I got 3 people captured already. Pierpont had received severe punishment at the hands of Deputy Evans while in prison, and now he was going to exact revenge.
Did he take his picture?
Yeah, this is what you get for making me take my picture, copper. Dietrich was stopped from killing him and letting the whole prison know what was happening. I could see having some anger, but that's not going to fix your problem because you had,
they aren't going to forget either.
Jailbreak and murder. So if you ever get caught, they're probably not going to let you live. Pierpont had received severe punishment at the hands of Evans while he was in prison. We've already talked about that. Stop reading the same lines. The convicts would take their hostages and began to walk carefully to their freedom. Stevens led the way, Dietrich on his left side and Hamilton on his right, their guns concealed beneath the stacks of shirts they were carrying. The other men picked up a steel shaft and soon followed. Though they walked almost the entire length of the prison, the guards and the other prisoners paid no attention to what was happening. I ain't no snitch.
Well, not only that, but they might be in a different part of the prison where they don't know what's going on either. They weren't part of the plan. And not only that, but it could be the regular routine that these guys did anyway, carrying these loads of shirts or these pipes,
And like I said, I'm sure somebody probably snuck on a guard uniform and, just blended in. When they arrived to the first steel gate, well, I guess they had a guard with them. Stevens told guard Frank Swanson to open the gate because the prisoners were armed and would kill if they didn't. So, like I said, they had somebody. Hey, if you want to make it home to your wife, I advise you to walk and not look suspicious. Swanson was forced to join the procession after proceeding through the second set of doors, and then as they came to the third gates, they used the steel shaft as a battering ram. Guard Fred Wellnitz was beaten, and guard Guy Burklow was forced to open the outer gates. Now the prisoners were in the lobby of the administration building. This is where they heard 8 civilian clerks herded like cattle. 8 civilian clerks into the vaults. 72-year-old Finley Carson was shot in the leg and the shoulder by Burns for not moving fast enough. Now you're in a hurry, but the 72 years old in 1920 or 1930, this guy is like probably over the average age of what people live, and he's working. Warden Lewis E. Kunkel, K-U-N-K-E-L, happened upon the group and was quickly made a prisoner as well. Yeah, put on these clothes. We're going to lock you up in here.
And take your picture.
You in the picture. Outside the gates, it was every man for himself. They escaped. Prisoners would end up splitting into 2 groups. The first group included Dietrich, James Clark, Fox and Burns. The second group included Pierpont, Hamilton, Clark, Makeley, Schaus, and Jenkins. With the alarm sounding, the Dietrich group encountered Sheriff Charles Neal, who had just dropped off some prisoners. Overpowering him, they would take his weapons and force him to take 3 of them in his automobile. At a gas station outside the prison, attendant Joe Pauletsky was struck in the head by Pierpont's group. The group commandeered another vehicle, releasing 2 women but forcing the driver to continue. They headed west a few miles, hiding in a farmhouse around 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon. The convicts in Sheriff Neal's car purchased gas at a gas station in Burdick, Indiana, about 20 miles west of Michigan City. The group abandoned the sheriff's car near Wheeler, Indiana, after carjacking another motorist. The group roared off with the sheriff still as their prisoner. At almost midnight, Mary Kinder answered a knock at the door in her Indianapolis home, or probably an apartment, and found Pierpont standing there. She immediately asked about her brother, Earl Northern. Northern was originally part of the escape plan, but was ill in the infirmary at the time of the jailbreak. That's another word that just doesn't look right to me. But you can tell there's a lot of words that just don't look right when you go to read them.
Like your name.
That's a tough one.
You should just start calling you
Dustin. Pearl Elliott soon arrived at the Saffel house and brought money. The convicts were ready to begin taking banks on their own, only to discover that John Dillinger had been arrested in Dayton, Ohio 4 days before the escape. And he was being held in the Allen County Jail in Lima, or some people say Lima. I don't know. Louisville, Lowell. I've heard people say it weird. So it's one of those things. Who knows how they say it? People that live there, just like Louisville, say one thing. The people visiting say another. The educated people say one thing while the uneducated say another. So who really knows? I'm going to say Lima because it looks like how you spell a lima bean. So here they escape and they think, oh, we're free. Like, we got this thing going. You know, we're going to meet up with John and we're going to start raising some hell. Oh, no. John's in jail. So what did the gang do? Well, he helped us out. Let's hatch a plan to free John Dillinger. They would abandon their cars in Indianapolis and would steal another, and they would hide their tracks. The Indiana State Police Captain Matt Leach became aware of the theft and threw up a blockade that had almost resulted in the gang's capture. During an attempted getaway from the police, the door of their auto opened and James Jenkins fell out.
Just happened to fall out there, huh?
Maybe he fell out, maybe pushed out. Who knows? Right. So the gang had to speed on, unable to wait on Jenkins. They would eventually steal another vehicle before reaching their hideout in Ohio. Ohio, as my mom would say. So Ohio, even there's multiple ways to say it. And who knows who's right? Because my mom's not wrong. Jenkins would later be killed that evening by a local posse near Bean Blossom, Indiana.
I've been there.
Never been there that I knew of. Maybe passed through if it's along the interstate, but
it's right there on your way to Brown County.
We're going to go to the Bean Blossom Festival. Where's it at? It's in Bean Blossom. I know what a bean blossom is. Probably a soybean or something. Who knows? Hell. No, soybeans weren't invented until 1942. I don't know. Who knows how long soybeans have been here? While Hamilton Pierpont realized that the group needed more money to help bust Dillinger out, Makeley suggested they rob the First National Bank in his hometown of St. Mary's, Ohio. It's only a few miles from Lima. Mary Kinder would rejoin the gang and agreed to travel permanently with Pierpont. On the morning of October 3rd, exactly 1 week after their escape, while the gang began loading into 2 cars for the robbery, Harry Copeland claimed he was too sick to drive. And Mary Kinder was asked if she would drive the second car for an equal share. See, women may not have had a chance to vote back then, but at least gangsters were able, like, hey, you help us, we'll get you in 50-50. Or 25-25, however many people there were, but everybody gets a fair share. At 2:40 p.m., Makeley entered the bank with Pierpont. Andrew Clark, along with Hamilton and Strauss, waited nearby. The robbery netted them almost $11,000. The bank had been closed by the Treasury Department, but had cash on hand to facilitate its reopening. The gang had to wash and dry the money a number of times to eliminate that new feel of the bills, so they could order to kind of pass those on and to make it feel like it wasn't fresh money. The gang would arrive in Lima on Columbus Day. Pierpont Clark approached the local attorney about getting Dillinger's sister into the jail for a visit. When the attorney told him he would talk to the sheriff the next day, the gang knew they had to act fast. Pierpont, Makeley, and Clark entered the jail around 6:25 p.m., while Shouse, Hamilton, and Dillinger's first partner, Harry Copeland, remained outside as lookouts. The gang members confronted Sheriff Jess Sarber, claiming to be Indiana State Prison officials, and they were there to return Dillinger to Indiana. When Sarber requested to see their credentials, Pierpont fired 2 rounds, hitting Sarber once in the abdomen, and Makeley and Pierpont then beat Sarber, demanding the keys to Dillinger's cell. While Sarber refused, his wife dug the keys out of the drawer in order to stop them from beating him. The gang would free Dillinger, they would lock up Sarber's wife and Deputy Wilbur Sharp, and the group escaped. Sarber died about 90 minutes later. So I've been to Sarber's grave in Columbus. It's outside of Columbus, Ohio. It's one of those things. I don't think that Sarber was a bad guy. I want to say that from what I've heard that he treated Dillinger well. I could be wrong and mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that they weren't overly happy with this, because now, you break him out and you just shot a police officer. Now he's dead. You've got a little bit bigger target on your back now. Granted, it isn't, enough to get the FBI involved, but it's still, enough to put attention on yourself. And back then it's weird how you could do something in another state and the law not want to follow you into another one. But it's a weird time in history with that. But, if you go back into Ohio, you're going to have problems. Matt Leach suspected that the Dillinger rescue was related to the Michigan City jailbreak. He also suspected that Pierpont was the brains behind the operation. Leach attempted to inspire friction within the ranks of the Dillinger gang. During news interviews, he made a point to call them the Dillinger gang, because it wasn't really about, a gang name. They were just looking to make a living. This ruse backfired, as Pierpont could have cared less what people called his, the gang. On October 14th, 1933, Dillinger, Pierpont, and Walter Dietrich raided the Auburn police station in Auburn, Indiana, of guns and bulletproof vests. Fun fact, if you watched, is it Expedition Unknown? They were doing some stuff on the Dillinger, looking for, the lost loot. That gun they stole some Tommy guns. One of those was returned back to the police department. So they do have it as operable. How cool would it be to shoot one of those Tommy guns? It happens.
I'd like to see shoot the one of Flat Tops from Dick Tracy. Right?
I've seen that movie in the movie theater, but I was too worried about watching Days of Thunder to care. But Dillinger and Van Meter would pose as tourists at the Peru, Indiana police station prior to Dillinger's arrest to scout out their arsenal. At about 10 p.m. on October 20th, 1933, Dillinger, Pierpont, and Dietrich would raid the Peru, Indiana police station for more guns and bulletproof vests. Seems like it's awful easy to rob a police station.
Yeah, I was going to say. And break people out of jails
here
and rob
within
banks.
In a week, you just robbed 2 police stations, because everybody knows the police had the good guns. Some World War I surplus Thompson submachine guns, a.k.a. the Chicago typewriter. Plans for the gang's first major robbery was of the Central National Bank in Greencastle, Indiana. They had escape routes that had been sketched out by Pierpont. Makeley scouted out the area and learned it was homecoming weekend for DePaul University, and the robbery was planned for Monday, October 23rd. At 2:45 p.m., a large Studebaker parked on the hill next to the bank, and 4 men would walk into the bank: Dillinger, Pierpont, Makeley, and Copeland, or Clark, depending on who you listen to. Pierpont headed for one of the cages to change a $20 bill. When the teller told him to go to another window, Harry pulled out a Tommy gun. The other gang members would pull out their guns and began cleaning the money from the vaults. Witnesses clearly identified Pierpont as the leader of the robbers. 5 minutes later, the robbery was over and the gang walked away with $74,000 in cash, which in today's money is a lot. So they also walked out with some bonds, and they did all this without firing a shot. My calculations tell me that $74,000 in cash and bonds today would be roughly, are you ready? Drum roll, $1.8 million today. That does not seem right.
Doesn't.
I feel like I messed up. But we're going to act like
according
it's
to Dustin's math. Do you want me to look it up while you're doing
while
that?
we're going, you can look up what
what years?
So, well, you remember this is the Great Depression, so the value of the money did change drastically. So if you took $74,000 in 1933 to today, it may be 1.8 million. I'm pretty sure it's right because we went from pre-depression to Great Depression. The value dropped.
Right.
So I think I'm right.
It would be, Dustin, 1.8 million. 1.879674.
I think that was, since I wrote this 6 months ago, that's the inflation that catched up.
How much do you think, what percentage rate of inflation do you think that is cumulative?
Oh God, probably 1,000%. No, 100%.
2,440.1%.
Yeah. And then just think $1.8 million today does not go as far as $1.8 million did 20 years ago, let alone almost 100. So they were quiet that no one at the police station across knew what was going on. So they were at least smart this time. Let's not fire any weapons. Let's get in as quiet as we can because there's a police station across the street, and let's sneak out. On November 16th, one day after Dillinger and his girlfriend Billy Frechette had escaped an attempted police ambush, the gang made the final details on a robbery of a bank in Racine, Wisconsin. At the same time, Copeland's drinking and Schaus's womanizing was causing friction within the gang. That afternoon, Pierpont, Makeley, and Mary Kinder drove to the American Bank and Trust Company in Racine, Wisconsin. Mary changed the bill while she cased the bank. The gang then drove around exploring the best getaway routes. Returning to Chicago, Pierpont suggested that the gang that Copeland should be dropped as the driver and Schaus put in his place. Schaus had other plans to rob banks on his own, and Mary Kinder overheard this conversation, and she tried to convince John Hamilton to join them. I think it's John. I'm starting to question myself. That evening, the gang decided to get rid of Schaus, and the next morning, they threw money at him and threw him out. On his way, Schaus stole Clark's car and headed to California. So, interesting tidbit there. The morning of the robbery, the gang decided to read the paper about Copeland's arrest the evening before. So, Harry Copeland got arrested the night before the robbery. At 2:30 p.m. on November 20th, Pierpont would walk into the bank carrying a Red Cross poster. He plastered it over the front windows to block the view of the teller cages from the streets. Makeley, Dillinger, and Hamilton then entered the bank, and Makeley would yell, "Stick 'em up," at one of the tellers who was on the phone. When the teller, Harold Graham, failed to comply, Makeley shot him in his elbow. As Graham fell bleeding, not really bleeding out, he set off the alarm that was connected to the police station. Why would you shoot somebody? You don't need to shoot nobody. Pierpont would order everyone in the lobby to lie on the ground while Dillinger marched the bank president and cashier, along with his assistant, into the main vault at gunpoint. While the cashier struggled with opening the vault, two officers responded to the alarm. Pierpont got the jump on one of them. Makeley shot the other, wounding him. With the vault Cleaned out, Dillinger and Pierpont would round up the cops, 3 female hostages, and the bank president. Using the hostages as shields, the gang marched out to their vehicle, taking a woman and the bank president and a police officer along with them. Makeley was shot at 2 detectives who had responded. A few blocks later, when the car ran into traffic, the officer was tossed off one of the running boards. So we're going to kind of hold you on here as a shield on the running board. And when we don't need you, we're just going to shove you off like we kick somebody else out of the car. Probably being a bad joke. So we just said, get out of our car. We're kicking you out. The gang would make the trip to Daytona Beach, Florida to lay low for a while and relax, but they didn't lay low for long. By January 15th, 1934, the gang was back in Indiana planning the next job. Dillinger and Hamilton robbed the First National Bank of East Chicago. Pierpont waited in the car while the 2 emerged with the money and the hostages. They faced several cops who had taken position on the outside. One officer, William O'Malley, fired at Dillinger but failed to injure him. Because Dillinger was wearing a bulletproof vest. Dillinger would return fire, allegedly killing O'Malley. Don't believe that. Dillinger was known to kind of shoot away above and at the ground. Don't think he was a killer, in my opinion. So they say, I don't know if it's ever been confirmed, but as far as I know, that John Dillinger was not a murderer. I will take that to the grave. I will fight you if you say anything bad, Jimbo.
He was a murderer.
Okay, when this podcast ends...
Well, if anything, we know he was an accomplice to murder, right?
He was an accomplice because somebody stupid was with him.
Well, I mean...
But we're going to turn this studio into a hell in a cell. I see all kinds of stuff I can beat the crap out of you with, so just be ready.
All I got to do is run around the ring for a couple minutes and you'll be out of breath and it's game over.
I'll lure you up to the roof and I'm going to throw you off. So just be ready. The other officers opened fire as Dillinger and Hamilton ran for the car. Hamilton was wounded, heading out west to lie low. Pierpont, Dillinger, and Makeley, and then Russell Clark would end up in Tucson, Arizona. Flush with cash and careless, the gang made several minor mistakes that would lead to them being recognized and captured. One by one, on January 25th, 1934, all 4 men and their girlfriends were extradited back to the Midwest. Dillinger to Indiana for O'Malley's murder. The other 3 were sent to Ohio for Sarber's murder. Testimony from Schaus, one of the first members of the Dillinger gang, helped convict the others. And yeah, so see what happens when you kind of kick somebody out and double cross them? They got a reason to work against you. In early March 1934, Pierpont, Makeley, and Clark were convicted of murder. While Clark got life sentence, Pierpont and Makeley were sentenced to die in the electric chair. On September 22nd, 1934, 2 months after Dillinger's death, Pierpont and Makeley carved phony pistols out of soap kicks, they say. I've also heard that it's wood, but I'm pretty sure it was wood. You hear soap, you hear this, you hear a potato. They would paint it black with shoe polish, and they would make their first move, brandishing their gun, quote unquote. They managed to get out of their cells and to the main doors of the jail. Makeley would be mortally wounded, and Pierpont was riddled with bullets. Although he survived, I guess so. This isn't technically Dillinger's break. It could have been soap. I would say somebody was probably pretty good at carving this stuff. I would think that somebody probably gave it to him. Who knows? It worked with wood. Why can't it work with soap? How would you feel if you got throttled by wood or soap? Who knows? Pierpont would be executed at the Ohio Penitentiary on October 17th, 1934. Still suffering from the injuries he occurred during the escape. He had to be carried to the electric chair where he was successfully put to death and pronounced dead at 12:14 a.m. Harry Pierpont was laid to rest at St. Joseph Cemetery in Indianapolis. I have been there. I believe that one was pretty sketchy. I'm pretty sure that's what I went to that was pretty sketchy. And the Chevrolet brothers are also in that same cemetery. pretty sure that's the same cemetery I'm thinking about. I got this thing about going to the graves of the Dillinger gang members, okay?
Yeah.
It's a little side quest I like to do.
Well, we just went to Dillinger's grave the other day.
We did. And it's funny, after all these years, there's every time you go, they'll clean it off and you'll have more, gun, bullets and change and pictures and trinkets that still show up. So what's the legacy of handsome Harry Pierpont? He'll never be as famous as John Dillinger. He didn't have the charm, the smile, the Robin Hood persona, but make no mistake, Pierpont was an architect. The mentor, without him, Dillinger may have been a nobody thief. With him, John Dillinger became a legend of the Great Depression. But legends fade, and the men who build them, well, you're going to have to just listen to find out more about these individuals. Man, I haven't went that long by myself in a long time.
That is what she said.
That's what she said. Yeah. So are you wanting to go next and make this a super duper long episode?
Let's do it. Mine ain't going to be that long.
Or do you want to stop it and have your own episode?
No, mine ain't going to be that long.
I didn't think this was going to be that long.
Well, it was that long. That's not what she said, right?
Now I know 7 pages of notes at 12-point font.
Well, when you read the same note 4 times.
I only lost my place once because I'm so used to using my computer monitor that's big and in my face and all this stuff. And now we're back in your studio, not my studio. I am off my game.
So the thing is, when we do Gangsters and Gunmen, there's obviously going to be a lot more information on a gangster than there is a gunman because we are going back even.
Well, I'm sure you can find
60,
more stuff.
70 years, even before.
I probably went a little too long on him versus some of the other ones, but.
Yeah, because half of it was about Dillinger.
Well, you get some. It's just, you're going to have, I'm trying not to overlap things. And this kind of led to his death. So it's going to be. I can't do Dillinger the same as everybody else, so I'm trying to hit the guys around him, tell their story.
But a lot of the things when we talk about these gangsters and gunmen, and they did run in a gang. So like you're talking about the Dillinger gang, I'm talking about the the Doolin Dalton gang.
The Doolin Dalton.
A lot of
gang.
their fates came down together where they ended up getting killed at the same place at the same time. It just And
we have people who were when they took this information that were alive that witness this, and some of that stuff is probably more 2-3 generations that have retold the story, so the information may be harder to corroborate and get accurate, so details are going to get dropped and things like that. So you do have some of those smaller gunmen are going to have probably harder research to do.
Absolutely. So dust off those boots, Dustin, because here we go. So we're going down the
wear my cowboy hat.
We're going down the train tracks, and we're going right into the heart of the Oklahoma territory.
Choo-choo.
Our guide? Well, he's a man known for his fast trigger, ruthless ambition, and fiery end. And no, we're not talking about Chris Benoit. We've already covered him. Right?
I was going to say Doc Holliday.
No, but he's coming. But that'll be a long one, too. But a man whose real name is mostly forgotten, but whose nickname still echoes across the plains. And that man was William, quote, Tulsa Jack.
Tulsa Jack.
Blake.
We had an Oklahoma.
You had Oklahoma Jack in yours. I was like, that's kind of weird.
That's kind of funny.
Because where is Tulsa?
That's where the Tulsa shootout is.
No, Dustin, what state's Tulsa in?
And you got the big giant golden driller.
Dustin,
in
what
the great
state of
Oklahoma?
I was going to say, you say the wrong state. That's going to be.
I'm getting there, okay? Just let me build it up.
He wasn't the leader of the gang. He wasn't even the brains behind the heist.
He wasn't even a member.
He wasn't even there. No, but he was something far more dangerous.
It was Owen.
He was like Jimbo is to this podcast. He was the muscle, the enforcer, and the last man you ever wanted to see riding towards your town.
Definitely not Jimbo. It's like, where's Jimbo riding?
To the Yummy Bowl.
He's riding to the buffet.
In the final days of the Wild West, Tulsa Jack helped lead a criminal crusade against law and order with the Wild Bunch gang, and in doing so, carved a bloody chapter in American frontier history. So for the next few minutes, we're going to unravel the life and violent death of a man who lived by gun and died by it also.
And that's all the time we have here, folks.
Bang, bang, he's dead. The thing is, little is known about William Blake's early life. There's no official records telling us where he was born or when he was born, though most historians place his birth somewhere in the early 1860s, likely in the southern United States. He came of age during the Reconstruction era, a time of upheaval, poverty, and lawlessness for many. Some say he started out as a cowboy. Others believed he was already a small-time criminal by the 1880s.
I should have been a cowboy.
Mama, don't let you
should have learned to rope and ride.
Cowboys.
Oh, I'm singing some Toby Keith here, so
I was singing Willie.
I'm over here singing some Oklahoma country music, and you're trying to go sing Willie Nelson.
Willie's every country, every state. But by the early 1890s, he had drifted into the Oklahoma Territory, which at the time was a haven for outlaws. With minimal law enforcement and wide open landscapes, Indian Territory, as it was then called, became a breeding ground for bank robbers, horse thieves, and killers. It was there that William Blake earned the nickname Tulsa Jack. Some say it came from a stint working near Tulsa. Others believed it was because he first showed his talent for outlawry in the area. Either way, the name stuck, and soon he was running with some of the most dangerous men in the country. By 1892, Tulsa Jack had joined forces with Bill Doolin, a charismatic former member of the Dalton Gang who had formed his own group of outlaws, the Wild Bunch, also known as the Doolin-Dalton Gang. These men weren't aimless bandits. They were organized, calculating, and deadly. The Wild Bunch included names like Red Buck, Bitter Creek Newcomb, Little Bill Radler, and Arkansas
Little Jimmy Dickens.
Tom Jones.
Oh.
It's not unusual to be loved by anyone. Oh, not that Tom Jones. This is Arkansas Tom Jones.
I like that song.
Together, they unleashed a wave of train robberies and bank heists that sent shockwaves through the American frontier. Dustin, most of your gunmen or gangsters, what they do, they rob banks. Most of the outlaws I talk about, they rob trains.
That was just mobile. I mean, instead of robbing a bank, once you get the source.
Yeah.
Today it would be an armored car.
Right. So Tulsa Jack quickly made a name for himself within the gang, not for planning jobs, but for carrying them out with brutal efficiency. He was often at the front lines of a robbery, revolvers in hand, barking orders and shooting first and asking questions later. One of the gang's most infamous jobs came on September 1st, 1893, near Wharton, Oklahoma. The Wild Bunch held up a Rock Island train, forcing the engineer to stop, then stormed the mail car, looting thousands in cash and valuables. Tulsa Jack was said to be ferocious during the robbery, covering the gang with precise gunfire, intimidating the crew and passengers with steely silence. Witnesses remembered him not for what he said, but for the cold look in his eyes. He didn't speak unless he had to, and when he did, people would listen. That robbery put the Wild Bunch at the top of every U.S. Marshal's hit list. Law enforcement's response was swift and coordinated. The government dispatched an elite group of lawmen to dismantle the Wild Bunch, most notably Heck Thomas, Bill Tillman, and Chris Madsen, a trio that would become known as what, Dustin? Not the Three Amigos. Not the Three Stooges.
The Three Hombres.
The Three Guardsmen. They weren't ordinary sheriffs. They were relentless trackers experienced in frontier combat and willing to use deadly force. For over a year, they hunted the Wild Bunch across Indian Territory using informants, tracking campsites, and waiting for any slip-up that the gang might have. But the gang remained elusive. Until that all changed in the spring of 1895. On April 3rd, which is one day after Dustin's brother's birthday, if I remember correctly.
May 3rd.
But not in 1895. He really wasn't thought about. But
1980s, not. I won't give too much because then they'll start trying to figure out and steal his identity.
But the Wild Bunch attempted another robbery, this time targeting a southbound Rock Island train near Dover, Oklahoma. The gang boarded the train, held the passengers at gunpoint, and looted the express car just as before. It was quick, violent, and once again, it was successful.
I'll have to ask my mom, be like, did they think that was a late April Fool's joke when you said I'm pregnant? I guess gave birth. I guess when you became pregnant, but it's like, I had a baby. Oh, April Fool's, right? No, I really didn't.
But so they thought it was successful, but this time they found out it wasn't. Unbeknownst to them, a posse had been tracking their movements and was ready. By the following day, April 4th, 1895, which if you're keeping track at home is 2 days.
My joke didn't work. It's like their attempt was like my joke, unsuccessful.
Right. The posse had caught up with them near the Cimarron River, close to the tiny community of Jennings. Tulsa Jack and a fellow gang member were spotted riding away from a hideout shack. The shootout was instant. Tulsa Jack dismounted and used a rock outcropping for cover. Armed with his trademark Winchester rifle and 2 revolvers, he returned fire for over an hour. This guy...
He was like, I'm going to have to hunker down and hope I can get out of this mess.
Right.
Damn, we're in a tight spot.
But for an hour? By yourself?
We're in a tight spot.
I'm running out of bullets, right? The lawman, outnumbering him, pinned him down, but he kept firing, refusing to surrender. Legend says he was hit multiple times, but continued to fight until he could no longer hold his weapon. When the smoke cleared, Tulsa Jack Blake lay dead, his body riddled with bullets. He died as he lived, gun in hand, surrounded by violence, and completely unrepentant. His death was a major blow to the Wild Bunch. While he wasn't the leader, Tulsa Jack had been a key figure in the gang's operations. He was the dependable shooter, the feared enforcer, and the one who never flinched when the bullets started flying. The press picked up the story. His corpse was photographed, much like other outlaws of the time, and put on public display. Dustin, if you had the chance to go to any of those public displays of an outlawman, gunman, gangster, would you go? I know they did it to Dillinger's. They had him out there, allegedly.
Allegedly it was Dillinger. They didn't allegedly have him at the morgue because they did have him.
Right. I'm just saying, would you go? Would your morbid curiosity take
Dillinger
over?
would take me because people lined up, man, for hours to it's crazy that when Dillinger was murdered, allegedly it was him, which I hate to say it, but I think it was. The more things you learn, they would dip the handkerchiefs in the blood.
Oh yeah.
And they would try to get pieces of hair, and they would line up and, and maybe in some cases pay.
That's what I was going to say. I was waiting for somebody like H.H. Holmes or somebody being there like, hey, for 5 cents, you could go in and see this.
Yeah,
right?
It's just crazy the morbid curiosity that was even back then.
Right.
They would sell tickets to public hangings, and, it's just crazy. But the story you're telling, I'm going to say it was probably told by history is told by the victors.
Right.
And if he was he the only one there in that shootout, or was the whole gang there?
No, it was him. Remember that he got caught riding away with that other guy. Yeah. They rode away. I don't know if the other guy ran away and he still, maybe I'll cover his story in a future episode, but
not knowing his fate, did he tell the story to the victors? Oh, we got in this hour-long battle to maybe boost up theirs, or maybe it really was an hour, but you won't know. But
right. Well, I mean, I don't know if law enforcement, they're not going to say, "Oh, it took us an hour to take one guy down." Right? They're not going to say that.
It's one of those things that, we got in a standoff, and this is how long it took. And in a way, it makes it look good, but it makes it look bad in a way. But
right.
Sometimes the storytelling is what you get somebody crafting a story.
That's like sometimes that's how they make legends. Billy the Kid, a legend, right? You talk about these people, and sometimes it's just stories. Well, my grandpa told me by his grandpa.
If this guy was so good, it took us an hour, but we defeated him. It makes you're trying to make yourself look better in the process. Right. It's the same thing. I go back to the Bible. You could say, well, I'm a descendant of Moses, and well, no. Moses killed his brother. No. Moses didn't kill his brother. That was Cain and Abel. Moses, he parted the sea, like legit parted the sea.
Moses killed an Egyptian too.
That's what I'm just saying. Like you can change things. So there's nobody living to verify your story. So telegraph what, you tell a wrestler, you're going to change the story. And who knows if what we know is even true.
Well, let's get back to our story. So after he was on public display, right, he became another cautionary tale, proof that the frontier had changed and that the era of the outlaw was rapidly coming to a close. Within a few years, the rest of the Wild Bunch would be killed or captured. Bill Doolin himself, which we've talked about, was gunned down by a posse in 1896. Bitter Creek Newcomb was betrayed and shot by a bounty hunter, and Arkansas Tom was arrested, later released, and killed in another robbery attempt. The Wild West was ending, but men like Tulsa Jack remind us that it didn't go quietly. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't even the most famous outlaw. But in that narrow, violent window between lawlessness and order, he was the embodiment of the frontier outlaw. Fast, brutal, and bound for an early grave.
And you can't tell the story of everybody else without, like I said, just like the Dillinger gang, you can't tell it without telling the stories of the supporting people.
Right.
And
because their stories need to be told too.
Yeah. I mean, they've got family and they've got, things that they did. And, we're not giving them recognition, just telling the story, but you can't tell the complete story without telling some of these smaller guys the story. So.
Right. Well, thanks for joining us for this. Wasn't planned to be this long episode of Gangsters and Gunmen, but into the life of Pierpont and William Tulsa Jack Blake. If you enjoyed this episode of Dark Discoveries, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend, or tell somebody you don't like. We don't care.
Yeah, your bitter enemy. I don't want my bitter enemies to be listening to this, but your enemies can.
So we're trying to bring some more true stories from the shadows of history, one dusty trail at a time. But until then, remember, Dustin, always remember, the deeper you dive,
the darker it gets.
Oh, wow. You ain't got nothing funny to say at the end of this one?
Not today.
Oh, okay.
Serious.
You must be hungry.